Hello, I'm now going to review a Rolling Stones album from 1967, Between the Buttons, released on January the 20th, 67 in the UK and not till the 11th of Feb in the US. And also around the time of this album, the single Let's Spend the Night Together, back with Ruby Tuesday, was released about a week after the album in the UK, and in the US those songs were featured on the album, but I'm going to review the UK copy, which the US copy dropped Please Go Home and Backstreet Girl. This cover, the first thing to say, is a great cover. Recorded on Primrose Hill in North London at 5:30 in the morning after an all-night recording session. And people have remarked about Brian Jones looking a bit dodgy here, but I guess they all look pretty dodgy at 5:30 in the morning. And one thing I not realised, well, maybe I did, but I'd forgotten, is these two little buttons look like buttons on Charlie's jacket. Contain the Rolling Stones' Between the Buttons. So I think this album is a unique part of the Stones catalogue because it's before psychedelia kicked in. It was the last of their, if you want to call it, innocent pre-psychedelia albums, and I think it's vastly underrated, and it really is very consistent. There's a couple of things I'd say. I'm going to review the UK album, as I said. So it opens with Yesterday's Papers, which is not the best song in the world at all, and some dodgy lyrics as well. Who needs yesterday's papers? Who needs yesterday's girl? Who needs yesterday's papers? Nobody in the world. I think this is a bit of a dodgy lyric, similar to Under My Thumb as well, but you know, the album more than made up for it after this. That's about my only track I don't particularly like on the album. My Obsession is an upbeat number with some good drumming from Charlie, and apparently this is one of Brian Wilson's favourite tracks of the Stones. And then that leads on to Backstreet Girl, missing from the US album. So all you guys in the US, I'm not sure which album it appeared on in the US, but it's a lovely ballad, albeit with some slightly dodgy lyrics again. You know, don't want you part of my world, you just be my backstreet girl. So this was Mick Jagger being his sexist self, if you like. But it's a great track, and a bit reminiscent of As Tears Go By as an acoustic number, and an important part of this album. And I wouldn't be without this track, because I think it was criminal in a way for the US to drop that track. Connection is another great upbeat number with driving bass. By the way, Keith, apparently I read that Keith plays bass on Yesterday's Papers and Connection, this track, and also the next track, She Smells Sweetly. So Bill Wyman, for some reason, was not featured on those tracks. But it's a good song. She Smiled Sweetly. I was noticing the double track vocal from Mick, and some nice organ work from Brian Jones. It's a very strong track. Cool, Calm, Collected as an upbeat number. Some great piano. Who's playing the piano on this track? I think it might be. It's not Ian. Ian Stewart plays on some of the tracks, but I think it's Jack Nish who plays on this track. Harmonica from Mick, I think. Good bass and good closer to side one, and then all sold out open side two with some good drumming from Charlie. By the way, someone commented on one of my videos that the greatest Charlie drumming was on the track Loving Cup from Exile, and I struggle to disagree with that. I think it's great drumming, but that's not from this album. good backing vocals on this track. Hey Hey, those ones. Please Go Home, the next track, probably the weakest track on the album, but decent. Not a lot I can say about it. Who's Been Sleeping Here, tongue-in-cheek lyric from Mick, and not bad. But then the album and Complicated, here's another upbeat number which is decent. By the way, the back cover features cartoon work from Charlie Watts with some pretty awful rhymes. I have to say, like, between the buttons behind the dirt, you know at times you often hurt. But before you hand us the cup, count your buttons before doing them up. Between the buttons on the ledge, do seem at times to go over the edge. Between the buttons at last they fit, and so to prove it, here they sit. It's not great, is it? I mean, but you know, good for Charlie to do some cartoons, not bad. But then the album finishes extremely strongly with Miss Amanda Jones, with some nice guitar from Keith. I read that Brian Jones only contributed electric guitar to one track on the album. I think Yesterday's Papers. Good production on this one, and but he's playing all kinds of instruments on the album: recorder, kazoo, harmonica, trumpet, trombone on various tracks, and even plays the piano on Backstreet Girl, I read. It got to number 3 in the UK, by the way, this album. Number 2 in the US with Let's Spend the Night Together and Ruby Tuesday, propelling it high in the charts. That single, not on the UK release. Keyboards from Ian Stewart and Jack Nish. Production Andrew Loog Oldham, the last album he would produce for the Stones. Recorded in Los Angeles, RCA Studios partially, and then IBC Studios London. So unlike the Beatles, the Stones did venture towards the US to record some of their albums. Mick Jagger, shortly after the album was released, said he didn't really care for it, and the only track he thought was any good was Backstreet Girl, and the rest of it, he said, was more or less rubbish. Anyway, don't agree with that. But then the album finishes with Something Happened to Me Yesterday, which is a delightful track, and kind of similar in style to some of what the Beatles would do on Pepper, like When I'm 64, that kind of playful kind of type song with Dixon of Dock Green, the UK TV show, Evening All kind of thing at the end from Mick. And I'm assuming it's Brian Jones playing the trombone on this track, which I think is delightful. And I was listening to this track last night and just dancing around the room to it. I think it's just brilliant. And some of you have commented on my channel about, I think, on my top 10 Stones albums, that this album is one of your favourites. And I would say it's one of my, well, it was in my top 10. Maybe it wasn't high enough as some of you might have liked, but I think it's a bit of an underrated album, and tends to get forgotten. And Something Happened to Me Yesterday is a great example of a Stones track which doesn't get talked about at all compared to Sympathy for the Devil or Jumping Jack Flash or some of their better known songs, but it's a great track. And anything I've missed? Let me see. I've talked about the cover, Primrose Hill, 5:30 in the morning. Brian Jones, moving away from the guitar, but showing his eclecticism in terms of his mastery of various instruments. And he would play the sax on the Beatles track, You Know My Name, Look Up the Number, from the same year, 67. Well, the first part of that was recorded in 67. So I think this is a great Stones album, and far superior, in my opinion, to their Satanic Majesties, which came out later this year. Perhaps not as strong as Beggar's Banquet or Let It Bleed or Sticky Fingers or Exile, but one of their best 60s albums, say no more. And thank you, Rolling Stones, and very glad to see these two buttons here. I guess if I got a magnifying glass out, I could see, because it's very small letters here on the cover, but there it is, the Rolling Stones between the buttons. And apparently between the buttons was a phrase meaning we haven't decided the album title, because I think Charlie asked Andrew Luke Oldham, what's the album going to be called, and he said it's between the buttons, meaning we haven't decided yet. And so Charlie went off and drew these cartoons, and they ended up calling the album Between the Buttons, which is a good title. I love the blue sky on the cover, by the way. And again, yeah, as I said, kind of the end of the Rolling Stones pre-psychedelia period, and a lot to be said for this album. They do a lot worse in their career. Thank you for watching. See you next time.